This session, let's welcome Daren Blomquist, the Vice President of Auction.com. In this session, we're going to continue the discussion of 2024 marketing trend. We're also focusing on the auction-related topic. And in this topic, we will see what will happen in this year, especially different markets, different type of properties. And with that, I will just hand the time to Daren.
Yes, thank you for having me. Great to be here. I've enjoyed speaking to your audience past and glad to have the opportunity to do that again. I know that when I've come to your events in the past, it's always been very good and very helpful. Even for me, I also usually meet many people who are already using Auction.com, which is great.
Yeah, we really appreciate you always come to join our forum, our offline conference. Many investors on our platform, including myself, used Auction.com many times. And we got a lot of great deal from your platform. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, so glad to share with you and hopefully get more people using Auction.com in the future. We do have the number of foreclosures is much lower than it used to be, but there are still lots of deals out there. So with that, I'll just jump in. And the first thing I kind of want to address is around the outlook going forward. We're starting into 2024 right now, and a lot of people want to know what's 2024 going to look like. And I wanted to start in terms of the real estate market, of course, specifically, and the economy affects that. I wanted to start with, here's the key metrics that I keep an eye on in terms of understanding where the real estate market is going to be going, and also specifically where the Auction.com business is going to be going in 2024. This is a very simple dashboard, but red means bad for the real estate market. Green is good. Yellow is kind of a warning sign, but not too bad yet. So it's very simple here. But what you see at a quick look, there's a lot of green. The real estate market, even though it's struggling in some ways in terms of volume of sales, inventory of homes available for sale, people are still very bullish about real estate. You see that in the home price appreciation. You see that in the low delinquency rates. You see that in consumer sentiment. Unemployment, the December numbers just recently came out. It's still holding strong at 3.7%, slightly up from a year ago, but really strong unemployment, which is good for the real estate market. Foreclosure starts are really staying even below 2019 levels. And so that's green. The only red we have on here, which are serious issues, is the mortgage rates. That's had a chilling effect on the real estate market. And I think it will continue to in 2024. However, mortgage rates, and as we know, are starting to come down. I believe they will come down slowly in 2024, but that will continue to be a headwind for the real estate market. The other big red flashing signal that could be dangerous for the real estate market in 2024 is the yield curve. And the yield curve is more of this technical signal that has historically been very accurate in anticipating recessions. That yield curve has been negative, basically meaning short-term rates are higher than long-term rates for several months now. And that is a strong indicator of a recession. In fact, I'll go to a slide here that shows that the New York Federal Reserve creates off of that yield curve a probability of recession. That probability of recession hit over 70%. And by the way, I should say this predicts a recession 12 months in advance. So as you can see here, it's just predicting out into 2024. For about mid-2024, there's a very high probability of recession based on that yield curve. A lot of people are using the phrase soft landing right now because there are a lot of signs that the market is coming in for possibly a soft landing, even though interest rates have been so high and the Fed has been intentionally trying to slow down the economy. But this is still something where I believe is indicating there's a very high probability of recession. It may not be a very severe recession that occurs in 2024. So that's one thing that could affect the real estate market. The effect on that would possibly be some higher delinquency rates. And here's, just kind of a summary of what I'm looking for in 2024. A mild recession with unemployment rising into the 4s in 2024. Right now it's at 3.7% into the 5s in 2025. And that's based a lot on what I think, but also when I look at other predictions put out by the group at Fannie Mae, which is a very good as a very good economic group. That's what they're predicting as well. As I mentioned, slowly dropping mortgage rates, slowly rising housing inventory. Housing inventory has been very low, and we're already seeing signs of that. I'll talk about that in a minute. A little bit more housing inventory. Home price appreciation, we've seen this in the last half of 2023, an uptick in home price appreciation, but I do think it'll slow back down 2024. And we'll see even a double dip in some markets in home prices. When I say home price decrease, I'm not talking 2008, 2009 variety necessarily, but more single digit. Flat foreclosure market, which is what we look at. And that's where a lot of the deals for real estate investors come from, is in the distressed market. But I do expect to see a little bit of an uptick at the end of the year. But for the most part, 2024 is going to look like 2023 in terms of foreclosures and many other ways as well, which is actually good for investors. It's somewhat predictable a market, even if it's not a rapidly appreciating market like we saw back in 2021, where we saw home prices going up by 15 to 20% each month on a year-over-year basis. So that's what we're looking at for 2024. I want to dive into a few of these things. I talked about the recession risk. That is still there, despite all the talk of the soft landing. The recession risk has come down a little bit, but that is for the end of 2024. But for mid-2024 here, we see that the highest recession risk we've seen since way back in the 1980s. So I think this is a strong indicator still that we have a risk of recession in 2024. And so that's one thing we're looking at. One of the reasons I think that we will see home prices continue to be slow, not single digit home price appreciation and even maybe flat home price appreciation nationwide and decreasing in some markets, is affordability. Affordability, November of this year, in December it came back down a little bit, but in November of 2023, I should say, not this year, we saw affordability at its worst that it's ever been if we look back historically. Almost 37% of average income was needed to buy a median price house nationwide. And that affordability constraint is going to mean that, I think, going to put downward pressure on home prices, combined with a slight rise in inventory. We're not going to see necessarily a huge wave of housing inventory hit, but this is going to keep downward pressure on prices. Now, the one thing that will give some relief to affordability is that blue line here, the 30-year mortgage rate. That's already started to come down. I think we'll start to see that continue to come down a little bit. That will help affordability. Affordability is way out of whack with the historic average affordability. And so I think we will need to see that dark blue line come back more to the normal, which is more around the 25% range, 25% of average income to buy a median priced house, which we were seeing back in 2018, 19, 20. And then the inventory, which I mentioned, we're starting to see inventory tick up a little bit. It's still, I want to emphasize that inventory is still very low compared to historic standards. On the left, you see existing housing inventory, which is the majority of inventory out there is existing homes, as opposed to new homes, which is on the right. But existing homes, we're seeing the inventory, it's coming up just a little bit, and especially the month's supply of inventory is coming up, which is an indication that supply is growing at a faster rate than demand is growing. You see it more clearly with new homes for sale. That inventory in 2021 really jumped. And now we see about a 9-month supply of housing inventory in new homes, which is quite a bit of months of supply. That I think is going to also put some downward pressure on home prices, or at least, and when I say downward pressure, I don't necessarily mean home prices are going to decrease, but we're not going to see this boom in home prices in 24. It's going to be more like 23, not so much like 21 in terms of home price appreciation. I do think we'll see this inventory continue to grow because, number one, mortgage rates coming down are going to convince some sellers to go ahead and sell. Also, some sellers who have been holding out because of the high mortgage rates will be forced to sell. They need to move, or they're in distress. And so those sellers have been able to hold out for some time, but will use this opportunity of a little bit lower mortgage rates to sell their homes. And so we'll see that continue to come up in 2024. And then getting into the distressed market, I think for the most of the year, we're going to see foreclosures flat. about the same number of foreclosures that we saw in 2023. However, there are early signs that consumers are getting stressed. Consumer debt is going up. And then more importantly, delinquencies on consumer debt is starting to go up. And this is particularly on auto debt and credit card debt. And this is data from the New York Consumer Credit Panel and Equifax. The two green lines there are the auto debt and the credit card debt, and the 30-day delinquency rate. Those have rebounded sharply in the last few quarters and are now back actually above pre-pandemic levels. So people are missing their payments, at least in the short term. Now, we haven't seen that translate as much to mortgage debt, but the light blue line there is mortgage debt delinquency, short-term delinquency. That has popped back up. It's still actually below pre-pandemic levels, though. But the credit card and auto debt tend to be early indicators that consumers are getting stressed. Eventually lead near the end of 24 to probably an uptick in delinquencies on mortgages, that and specifically foreclosures. This is the SDQ rate, which stands for seriously delinquent rate. That first slide was short-term delinquency. If you've missed for 30 days, if you've missed payments for 90 days or more, we see those new seriously delinquent rates going up again with credit cards and auto loans. And especially with credit cards, you see those spiking above pre-pandemic levels. Again, with mortgages, we don't see as dramatic of a jump, but they're starting to come back up. And I think by the end of 2024, this will translate into a little bit of an uptick in foreclosures. That's what we're seeing in terms of the market. I want to start looking at some of the auction.com data to talk about what we're seeing, especially in the distressed market. Again, and the reason I think that's important is for you all out there is this is the source of a lot of deals for real estate investors is the distressed market. It also has a ripple effect on the larger real estate market. This is basically distressed supply, properties that are either in foreclosure or bank owned that are going to auction. And the main takeaway from this is that we're seeing levels of distress that are basically less than half of pre-pandemic levels. On the left-hand side, you see the foreclosure auctions, properties that actually go to the courthouse steps, trustee sales or sheriff sales in some states they're called. Those have been running about over the last year or so at about, so very low. I mean, it's a steady supply, but it's low relative even to 2019 levels. 2019 was a low watermark for foreclosures. A similar story for the REOs, which REO stands for real estate owned. Those are bank-owned properties. The bank has actually foreclosed and owns the property, and now they're selling at an auction. And those are running about a third of pre-pandemic levels. It's kind of plateaued. It is a steady supply, but it's well below those pre-pandemic levels. That could be seen as bad news for investors, and in a sense it is. There's less inventory to buy. The good news there is that there's no threat here that these distressed sales are going to tank the overall real estate market. These are a smaller share of the real estate market than they've been in the past. And so there's not this wave of foreclosures that's going to hit and cause a crash in the housing market, at least that we see at this point. The good news is that even though there's lower inventory of distressed supply for distressed properties is consistently below market, that's largely because the condition of the properties and also the fact that the buyer takes on additional risk. Typically with these auctions, you do have to buy with cash. You may be able to get financing through some type of lender that specializes in to real estate investors. But the good news here is these numbers here represent what purchases on auction.com specifically, and the purchase price, the winning bid at auction, relative to the estimated after repair value of the homes. And what we see in the third quarter, and this went down a little bit in the fourth quarter, is that our buyers are purchasing at about over 40% below the after repair value of the property. So basically getting a 40% discount. Now, there's a reason they're selling below after repair value, and that's because a lot of these properties are in need of repair. But this is good news. And the other piece of good news here is that the discounts are above what they were even if you go back to 2019. So buyers at foreclosure auction are purchasing for a bigger discount. If you go back to 2019, it was running more like 60%. Now it's below that 60%, which means a 40% discount. During the peak of the kind of pandemic real estate frenzy, you see there in 2021, our buyers were purchasing at more like 65% of after repair value. So the discount was lower then. Discount has now come back. There are good discounts available on these properties. Now, one of the things that we look at is how our bidders are bidding on properties tell us something about the larger real estate market. And in fact, our bidders, because they know their markets very well and they know real estate very, very well, they're good predictors of what's going to happen in the larger real estate market over the next 6 months, especially since a lot of our buyers are buying these properties, renovating them, and then putting them back into the retail market about 6 months later. So they're constantly thinking about what's going to be happening 6 months in advance. This is specifically for foreclosure auctions, but it's that same metric that I was showing in the previous slide, which is the percent of after repair value that they're buying at. Our buyers back in late 2022, they anticipated the housing market was going to slow down in early 2023. That 51.8%, they built in a bigger discount into their purchases, almost a 50% discount back in late 2022. You see in the retail market, this is home price appreciation from the National Association of Realtors, that followed suit. We saw that dipping down and it went as low as negative 3% home price appreciation about 6 months later, May of 2023. Now, starting at the beginning of 2023, our buyers also anticipated that the market would rebound. They started buying more aggressively and bidding more aggressively, up to 60% of after repair value on average. And then we saw the retail market has followed suit as well. But what we've seen in the last 6 months is actually our buyers getting a little bit more conservative on bidding, which tells us that's one of the reasons I do think that we're going to see a slowdown in home price appreciation in the first half of 2024. Our buyers are anticipating that, and that's often a good indicator that that's actually going to happen. So that's the bidding behavior. I think there's, two takeaways from that are that we're not going to see any huge rebound in home prices in the first half of 2024, but also that discounts at distressed sales are good. You're on average, folks are getting over 40% discount over after repair value on these properties. And here's that same data broken down by market. I presented this as home price correction risk. Another way you can look at this is opportunity in terms of discounts. And basically the red markets are areas where there's bigger discounts available. That may mean that there's more risk of a home price correction in those markets as well, but there are bigger discounts available. So places like New Haven, Connecticut, Charlotte, Gulfport, Mississippi, Tallahassee, and Los Angeles are all red on this map, meaning that they have bigger discounts relative to their historic averages. I have Los Angeles here on the right-hand side featured, and there's a QR code for folks. You can scan this QR code and pull this map up to go in. It's an interactive map. You can go into your market. For instance, in Los Angeles, we see that the discount is 39%, which is good for Los Angeles. We compare each market to itself rather than to other markets. That's a 10% higher discount than buyers in Los Angeles were getting 4 years ago. Foreclosure volume in Los Angeles is still well below pre-pandemic levels. It's only 42% of its pre-pandemic levels. However, the sales rate is very strong, meaning even though our buyers are being more cautious, conservative in Los Angeles when they're bidding, they're still buying a lot of properties. They're still interested in buying in Los Angeles. That 98% means the sales rate is 98% of its pre-pandemic level. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, some of the markets that don't have as big of a discount available, but also are at lower risk for a home price correction are places like Hartford, Connecticut, which is interesting. There's 2 Connecticut markets in there. Hartford is more in the middle of the state. New Haven is more of a bedroom commuter community to New York. So New Haven's a little bit more at risk. Hartford is more stable. Augusta, Georgia, Flint, Michigan, Wichita, Kansas, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, interestingly, a lot of our buyers have seen San Francisco as already have been a market that's corrected, and so is maybe a value market now. which is interesting to talk about San Francisco that way. All right, so moving on here, another heat map, which you can scan the QR code. This is in terms of just volume, like where would you find distressed properties in 2023? And this is based on where we saw a high percentage of scheduled foreclosure auctions in the third quarter of 2023. Those scheduled foreclosure auctions are a predictor of the actual auctions that are going to occur in the future. And so these are areas where we see a high volume of scheduled foreclosure auctions relative to I always go back to the 2019 levels because that's a good benchmark. So areas where we are seeing an increase in scheduled auctions, indicating more auctions in 2024, more buying opportunities are Detroit, Denver, Minneapolis, St. Paul, New Orleans, and Indianapolis. On the other side, where the scheduled auctions are still pretty small, and there's not as many buying opportunities, or New York, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and Miami. So, Los Angeles has come up a couple times. It's got some really good discounts available, but there are fewer properties available than there used to be. The availability is not as good there. And I'll talk in a minute just about some ways, if you are in California, Los Angeles, some ways that you could buy in other parts of the country if you wanted to. That's not for everybody, but we have technology to help with that. When we're forecasting out for the next 5 years, which is really hard to do, nobody knows for sure, of course, what's going to be happening in 2028. But we have 3 scenarios. But basically, in all 3 scenarios, 2024 looks the same. And this is in terms of foreclosure volume. And this is not just auction.com. This is the entire market. So back in 2019, we saw about 200,000 properties brought to foreclosure auction nationwide. And not just on auction.com, but across the market. Now we got as low as about 60,000 in 2021. It's come up to about 80,000 in 85,000 in 22, 23. We're expecting 24 to look a lot about the same. Now, at the very end of 2024, we do expect potentially an uptick. And there's 3 scenarios. If we do have that soft landing in the real estate market, that's what the green line is. You basically see foreclosures flatline over the next 5 years. If we do see a slow correction in the housing market where home prices come down slowly over a period of years, we would see the yellow line. We would see foreclosures get back up to about 2019 levels by the end of this 5-year period. If something caused a shock in the real estate market that really caused a more fast and extreme correction in home prices, we would expect to see the red line occur, which is foreclosure volume getting back up to more like 2016, 2017 levels. Right now, I'm putting my money on the yellow line. That's, I think, the most likely scenario, but there's a lot of people who think the green line is going to happen too. So to put this in context, if you go back 20 years, this is what foreclosure volume looks like. Back in 2008, 9, 10, we were seeing over 1 million foreclosure auctions a year. So even with the red line, we're not even getting back close to that volume. And then just to end this out, I wanted to give hopefully some practical steps for using auction.com to take advantage of the distressed deals that are out there. And so the first thing I'd say is search, register. You can go auction.com. It's a completely free site unless, when you go to bid, you have to register. And if you actually are the winning bidder, you have to have the funds to do that. But you can go search and register, save properties, sign up for email alerts just to get an idea of what's available out there. Determine what types of properties you want to target, what types you want to buy, your exit strategy. Consider markets with less competition that still fit your criteria. Inventory is less in Los Angeles, but in Detroit, which we see inventory coming up in terms of foreclosures, that may be a market you want to consider. One thing I'd say is attend a foreclosure auction in person if you've never done that. Actually go to a foreclosure auction and see how it works. And I can tell you more about how to do that in a second. And then also sign up for remote bidding, which allows you to bid remotely and not have to go in person to the auctions. Remote bidding is not available everywhere, but it's available in over 1,000 counties nationwide. So the search, register, just go to auction.com, type in a search. And then if you register, the nice thing here on the bottom, I'm registered. You can set your criteria for the types of properties you're interested in. You can start saving properties that you're interested in. You can do other things like bid and all that. But this will start to get you familiar with what's the inventory that's available out there on auction.com. There's a lot of data on this screen, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what is actually available. And this is for 2023. The average sales price of properties that sold on auction.com was $190,000. That's a lot lower, obviously, than the overall market. Now, these tend to be older properties. They were built on average in 1971. They have an average of 3 bedrooms, just shy of 2 bathrooms, 1,700 square feet. So just to give you an idea of the type of properties purchased on auction.com, for a lot of people, it's important whether the property is occupied or vacant. Occupied properties do come with more risk. That's part of the reason you get a discount, is that you may have to deal with the current occupant, and the worst case scenario, you may have to deal with evicting those occupants. Those occupied properties, at least at foreclosure auction, they represent about 73% of the properties that sell. If you go to the bank-owned properties, it's about 50-50. There's still a lot of demand for occupied properties, but a little bit less. The sales rate is a little bit lower. The after repair value is a little tough. I'd look at the price over the exterior as is value, which is a more precise price of the property. You know, people who are purchasing occupied are building in a bigger discount there than they are for vacant properties. And then you can look at the data by price range. Most of our properties estimated value is. We do have some very low end properties, but that's only 1% of our inventory. We have some over 500,000, 14% of our inventory. Most of it is in the middle here, between 100,000. The value, again, is between 100,000 and 300,000. The actual sales price of those properties is lower still. You know, the 100 to 200,000, they're selling for 80,000. The 200 to 300,000 after repair value, they're selling for 135,000. So you can see some of those metrics here. If you look at the discounts tend to be bigger on the low end and go up and be less at the high end. And then the rural, actually, most of our properties are considered rural. So that's something to consider as well, is 54% of our properties are rural areas. But then we also have suburban cities. So just to give you an idea of the inventory, but if you go to auction.com, you'll start seeing what the inventory looks like very quickly. And then I mentioned attending an in-person foreclosure auction. The best way to do that is go to auction.com/calendar. And I just pulled a screenshot yesterday, and there's a lot more auctions than just these. These are just the first few that were on the screen. We're nationwide. So, you know, if you're in New York, you can go here. If you're in Northern California, you can go here. Actually, these were all January 1st, so I apologize. These are a little out of date. But if you go there, you'll see the ones that are coming up. So that's where you go to actually attend an in-person foreclosure auction. You'll see at the auctions, people in the bright green shirts. Those are auction.com employees. And we do our best to answer all your questions. You know, especially if you go there early, you can go and talk to those folks and find out how it works. In the old days, auctions were very difficult to navigate. It was hard to know what was even going on. It was just kind of a good old boys club. And now what we've tried to do is make it easy and make it friendly for you. So you can go and see those people in the green shirts and talk to them, find out how things work. Even if you're not bidding, that's okay. So I'd encourage you to go and just experience that even before you decide to bid on a property. And then sign up for remote bid, as I mentioned. This has been, I believe, revolutionary, because now you don't have to go in person to the auctions. You can bid remotely. Now, the auctions still take place at a certain time, but you can do it from your phone. And you do have to put funds into an escrow account so that you can bid, but those funds are only taken out, of course, if you're the winning bidder. To do that, just go to auction.com/LP/remote bid. Find out more about that, and then get the auction.com app on your phone to actually sign up through your phone to do remote bid. We've seen a lot of success with remote bids, over 260 million winning remote bids over the last couple of years that we've been doing this. So a lot of people are taking advantage of that. So with that, Joshua, that is what I've got for today. Really appreciate, again, you giving me the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Thank you so much, Daren. That's a lot of information. I believe a lot of audience will already take a lot of notes. A lot of content indeed to consume. We probably, this topic later on, need to continue on our platform. So as we discussed before, maybe we could, schedule another special session for like how to use auction.com, how to find the investment property from the auction.com, because that's the great channel to get a discount property for investment purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've pinged my buyer success team, and they would be a great group to do more of a practical working session on how to use auction.com with your audience. So yeah, I'd love to get that going in 2024.